So DQS India is very happy to organize this knowledge session, what we call as a remote customer experience exchange. And I'm very thankful to my German colleagues who are spending the time to share their inputs on European medical device regulation certification process. So before we start the session, let's have some house rules. The session is getting recorded. All the attendees will be in listen mode only. If you have any questions during the session, kindly use the chat box. You can find the chat box in the control panel. Put your questions, and at the end of the session, the panelists will answer your questions. So with this, I will start today's session. So I will start with a small introduction of who are we. DQS, who we call as the Deutsche Quality Systems. Basically, we are Germany's first certification body for management systems. As you can see here, we started our organization in 1985. We are one of the few successful American and European joint stock, with UL being the one of our major shareholders, and DIN and DGQ are German other shareholders we have. We are also one of the first CBs to have two standard rating bodies as a part of our shareholder and board. Apart from the major shareholders, we also have every company business says customer center of the business. In our case, it's true because we have VDMAs, Spectaris. They're basically customer certifications, and they're also sitting at the board. So this really helps DQS to understand the customer trends and prepare the offices accordingly. So a short history of DQS. We started in 1985, and as you can see, DQS became a notified body for medical devices in 1995. So more than 25 years we are with medical devices industry. Currently we are celebrating 35 years, and there's a merger between UL and DQS on 2008. So as you can see, we are a major shareholder, and we released our business certificate in 2013. So we have more than 70,000 customers across the globe. So it is operating in 60 countries. One of the founding members of IQNet membership. Last year we did more than 25,000 audit days, and our major strength is our auditors. We have more than 2,500 auditors across the globe. So these are our services. We are into sustainability, IT. We are into all the QMSs like 9001, 14001, 45001. We are also we have a huge market with respect to specific industries like automotive, telecom, aerospace. Today we are going to discuss about one of our major area of business, which is medical. So in medical we do ISO 13485, we do WHO GMP, CE marking in MDR as well as MDSAP. To hear more about our service on MDR, now I'll request Amruta to start the presentation. Amruta, I'm sharing you and making you the presenter. Stage is all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Ganesh. Just a second. I did not. Yeah, now I received. Can everyone see my screen?
Amruta, I think we have to share the screen. Yeah, now we can see a slide. Sure.
Yeah, you can see. Okay. Thank you, Ganesh, for the nice introduction. So good evening, everybody. My name is Amruta Bhava, and I am working with DQS MED, the German subsidiary, since past 4 years now, as a regulatory affairs manager, and I'm also the product manager for TCP. And today we are going to present you or give you a little overview of the new MDR, the medical device regulation, its conformity assessment routes, and the process, along with my colleague, Mr. Matthias Notheis. He is the Director of International Business Development, Auditor Management, and also the Deputy Head of a certification body. So the agenda for today's webinar is something like this. Yeah, so we start along with the MDR conformity assessment process, then move on to the assessment routes offered by MDR and the conformity assessment model for MDR provided by DQS, and then lastly we'll have a Q&A session, and there you can ask all of the questions which have been occurred during the presentation. Yeah. A short disclaimer, the information which we are providing here is based on our understanding of the MDR and might be subject to change depending on the rules changing and the regulations imposed by the European Union and European Commission. So let's start with the conformity assessment process. The MDR conformity assessment process is basically similar to the existing medical device directive. It is same. So it all starts with first deciding whether the product which you have to market is a medical device or not. If it's a medical device, you need to first classify the device based on the intended use. Once you have classified the device, you need to select the conformity assessment route and then need to check whether a notified body involvement is required or not. If yes, then the notified body will review your technical file, perform an audit, and lastly, you will be given a CE certification. Once you have a CE certification, you need to sign the declaration of conformity, affix a CE mark, and you're good to go to market your product. But just marketing the product does not end your responsibility. You also have to meet the post-market obligations. The same holds true with MDR. Everything remains the same as it is with the existing medical device directive. Only here the post-market obligations have been strengthened a little more. So, as I said, the first and foremost thing to decide when applying for an MDR certification is to decide whether your product is a medical device or not, and Articles 1 and 2 of the MDR are key for it. Yeah, if it is a medical device, you can proceed on with a certification, and if it is not, then you are not eligible to apply for an MDR certification. So now the question arises, what is a medical device? Yeah, the medical device is the definition of medical device is provided in the Article 2.1 of the MDR, and the classifications rule for the same are found in Annex VIII of the MDR. Yeah, MDR defines the term medical device as any instrument, apparatus, appliance, software, implant, reagent, material, or other article intended to be used for any following medicinal purposes: and diagnosis, prevention, monitoring, prediction, prognosis, so on and so forth. So the main takeaway from this definition is that the device in question should be intended for humans, is dependent on the intended purpose of the device as provided by the manufacturer, and the product in question does not achieve its principal mode of action based on pharmacological, immunological, or metabolic reactions. A slight reminder, as you know, in addition to the products meeting the MDR's definition of medical devices, it must also be noted that the MDR even contains new items such as Class 1 reusable surgical instruments, drug-device combinations according to Article 117, or devices utilizing human tissue derivatives, or software that was currently classified as Class 1 and has now been upclassified depending on the intended use as either Class 2A or 2B. And the foremost important thing is the devices according to Annex 16, that while being aesthetic or non-medical, have no medical purpose, but still must comply with the MDR specifications, and that too after 26th May 2021, in order for them to be market viable. So, as I mentioned, the classification of MDR is pretty much the same as it is currently under Medical Device Directive. So the Medical Device Regulation has 4 main categories of medical devices, namely Class 1, Class 2A, 2B, and Class 3. This goes from products with low risk, that is Class 1, to products with high risk, that is Class 3. The only difference which is not yet available in the current medical device directive is Class 2B devices as per Rule 12. I'll come to it in a later part of the slide. So, before you can start off with the classification based on risk classification, the first and foremost thing to decide for medical device manufacturers who are seeking to place their products in the European market is to determine whether the classification is based on the 4 criteria which you can currently see on the screen, and whether notified body involvement is required. As the market is transitioning from medical device directive to the medical device regulations, device manufacturers must also take a note that the changes in requirements for device classification. For example, the devices that had previously been included in the active implantable medical devices directive are also now covered under the medical device regulation. The medical device classification are based on the vulnerability of the human body, should take into account the potential risks associated with the technical design and manufacturing of the device. These rules can be found in the Annex VIII of the MDR. So according to the Chapter 1 of Annex VIII, there are 4 criteria laid down by the MDR for classification of the device. Firstly, duration of contact. Secondly, degree of invasiveness. Thirdly, the anatomy affected by use of the device. And lastly, whether the device is an active device or non-active device. It is also beneficial to note that Chapter 2, paragraph 3.1 of the MDR lists that application of classification rules shall be governed by the intended purpose of the device. That is, if your intended purpose is in brain or heart, the device will be Class 3. If not, it might be Class 2A or 2B. Secondly, the MDD contains 18 rules for classification, which these rules can be found in the Annex 9 of the MDD. But the new MDR contains overall 22 rules and does 4 more extra rules than the previously published medical device directive. These rules are grouped into the primary application of the medical device, and selecting the applicable rule for medical device is decisive with the risk classification. In both the cases, the rules are based on the potential risks associated with the device, the technical design, and the manufacturing of the device. So these rules are grouped as follows. Rule 1 to 4 is based on non-invasive devices, as non-invasive devices are those devices which are barely in contact with the patient by means of either being in contact with intact skin or not in contact with the patient at all. Rules 5 to 8 are based on invasive devices. Invasive devices are those devices which are introduced into the patient's body by means of either through an opening in the body, the so-called body orifice, or through a rupture or break in the skin. Rules 9 to 13 are those for active devices. An active device is any medical device relying on source of power, either electrical through electrical energy or any source other than that directly generated by human body or gravity. And lastly, rules 40 to 22 are special rules, and these special rules extend the above set of rules into the context of potential features of the devices. As these features are special and do not fit into the above listed rules from 1 to 13, the MDR has collated them into special rules. Furthermore, as it can be expected, the greater the risk presented by the revise, the higher will be the classification and the greater is the requirement of the notified body. Now let's move to the conformity assessment routes presented by the MDR. According to the Article 2.40, Article 2, Paragraph 40 of the MDR, conformity assessment means the process demonstrating whether the requirements of this regulation relating to the device have been fulfilled or not fulfilled. Conformity assessment in a new MDR is essentially unchanged as from the current medical device directive. The MDD's conformity assessment article has really been just renumbered. So the Article 11 of the current MDD will be replaced by Article 52 of the new MDR. Likewise, the conformity assessment annexes have also been just renumbered and renamed. That is, Annexes 2 to 8 of the current MDD will be replaced by Annexes 9 to 11 and 13 of the new MDR. But apart from that, the requirement for manufacturers to conduct the conformity assessment before placing their device on the market for higher risk devices to involve a notified body remains unchanged. The options for conformity assessment route a manufacturer may select depend on the device class, that is risk class, and thereby risk class, and consists of meeting the requirements of single or combination annexes. So the MDR thereby presents, in addition to compliance with general safety and performance requirements, the manufacturer must select an appropriate route to conformity assessment, and device classification partially determines this route. So in the MDR, the annexes can be grouped as quality system assessment annexes and product assessment annexes. So the quality system assessment annexes are Annex 9, excluding Chapter 2, and Annex 11, Part A. Annex 9 is used when a full quality management system is implemented by the manufacturer, is based on the ISO 13485, considers the full life cycle of a medical device, including design and manufacturing aspects, confirms the design process, manufacturing, and corresponding inspections aligned together with the technical documentation. Depending on the device classification, a full or partial compliance to Annex 9 may be required. Annex 11, on the other hand, is generally used in association with Annex 10 or in combination with technical documentation Annexes 2 and 3 for low-risk devices. It is based on ISO 13485 without considering design, considers only the manufacturing aspects and inspections, but not the design, and confirms the manufacturing and confirms that manufacturing and design, manufacturing and inspections are aligned with the technical documentation. Product assessment annexes are thereby Annex 2, Chapter 2 on assessment of technical documentation. Here, the manufacturer submits the technical documentation to the notified body for a single examination. And Annex 11, Part B, that is product verification, a notified body here examines every device and verifies it against technical documentation and EC type examination. There is another product assessment annex, namely Annex 10, which is equivalent to Annex 3 of the MDD, but that has not been mentioned here because DQS MED does not have a is not notified for this annex. So now let's move on to the device classifications. As previously mentioned, MDR has 4 device categories. The first one being the low risk category, that is class 1 devices. Here, class 1 devices may be classified as only class 1 and class 1 devices with certain aspects to it. So for the class 1 devices, the only route for certifying a class 1 medical device is to maintain a technical documentation in compliance with Annex 2 and 3 of the MDR. For medical devices that fall in this category, a notified body involvement is not required, and manufacturers self-declare the conformity of the device, affix the CE mark as described in Annexes 4 and 5 respectively, and thereby fulfill the general obligations of all manufacturers according to Article 10 of the MDR. But if a class 1 device is supplied in sterile form or has a measuring function or is a reusable surgical instrument, then a notified body involvement is necessary. A limited QMS must be quality management system must be in place to control the production or to control the special characteristics. As mentioned, a notified body involvement is required to control how the QMS manages those specific features in regard to the conformity assessment procedure selected by the manufacturer. Class 2A devices. Similar to the current MDD, the manufacturers of Class 2A devices have the option of following the same conformity assessment route as for Class 2B devices, the new Full Quality Management System Annex 9. Alternatively, a manufacturer may choose not to follow a full QMS approach similar to the current MDD Annex 7, combined with either Annex 4 or 5 and thereby build their technical documentation aligned with the Annexes 2 and 3, prepare a declaration of conformity according to Article 90, and thereby the notified body will assess either the technical documentation of at least one representative product per product category covered by a basic UDIDI, that is Unique Device Identification Device Identifier, Annex 11 Part A Section 10, or the notified body carries out tests to confirm the conformity of the devices according to Annex 11 Part B Section 10. So, Class 2B devices. Class 2B devices should be considered as a part of following categories. Class 2B devices according to Rule 12 devices, Class 2B implantable devices, and Class 2B devices that are not included in the above categories. So, firstly, Annex 2, Class 2B devices according to Annex 8, Rule 12 devices. Similar to the current MDD, manufacturers of Class 2B devices have the option of following the same conformity assessment route as for Class 3 devices, that is the new EU MDR's Annex 9, with the difference that the notified body is only required to assess the technical documentation of at least one representative device covered by the basic UDIDI per generic device group. As with the current MDD, there are alternative routes for the manufacturer of Class 2B devices who choose not to follow the full quality management system approach. These are the same as those for Class 3 devices, but with one fewer alternative available to the manufacturers as compared to MDD. There is no equivalent to MDD's assurance. Manufacturers currently following this route will have to option from the new Annex 11, either Part A or Part B, that is product verification. As mentioned, this is a new classification introduced by the Rule 12 is a new rule introduced by the MDR, and here, in addition, an expert panel involvement will be required to review these products. Here, the expert panel has to judge whether the clinical evaluation report is sufficient to provide confidence in safety and performance of the device, and whether an additional scientific assessment report is required. So in addition to the conformity assessment based on the annexes, there will be an additional scrutiny procedure, or the so-called clinical evaluation consultation procedure. Class 2B implantable devices, the conformity assessment route remains the same. That is either Annex 9, including chapters 1, 3, and section 4, or Annex 10 along with Annex 11 Part A or Part B. Here, the only difference is when assessing the technical documentation for Class 2B implantable devices, no sampling is carried out and all the devices must be reviewed. Class 2B implantable, VET, and non-implantable, non-Rule 12 and non-VET. VET are the exceptions of well-established technologies which involve sutures, staples, dental fillings, braces, tooth crowns, screws, wedges, plates, wires, pins, and so on and so forth, as listed by the Article 52 of the MDR. The basic conformity assessment route remains the same. That is either Annex 9 or Annex 10 along with Annex 11 Part A or Part B. Here, the technical file will be assessed based on per generic device category assigned. Class 3 devices. Class 3 devices can be grouped as either non-implantable and implantable, including devices with medicinal substances or human tissue or animal tissue derivatives, or Class 3 Rule 21 devices. Rule 21 devices are those where I'll come to it later on. So for Class 3 medical devices, Annex 9, including a full quality assurance audit and a full technical documentation review, is a viable option. A certificate will be issued following a notified body quality management audit, and a second certificate will be issued for every device after the review of the associated technical documentation is approved. It should be noted that manufacturers for Class 3 medicinal devices also have an additional option to pursue Annex 10 type examination in combination with Annex 11 Part A or Part B, and therefore with a QMS focused on production and control. But for Class 3 devices, there is 2 additional steps before a CE certificate can be issued. It is namely a consultation procedure for devices incorporating drugs, and the manufacturers must comply with Annex 9, Section 5.2, including verification of quality, safety, and usefulness of the medicinal substance, or for devices incorporating animal or human tissues, manufacturers must comply with Annex 9, Section 5.3. As DQS MED is only notified for animal tissue procedures and not for human tissue procedures, so the manufacturers submitting such products from TSE susceptible species such as bovine, evaluation of compliance with the TC regulation is a must. For devices that are introduced into the human body through bodily orifices or applied on the skin and intended to be absorbed or locally dispersed. This is the Rule 21 I mentioned earlier. The manufacturers must comply with the Annex IX, Section 5.4, including evaluation of compliance with Annex I of the concerned regulation, that is 2001-83 EC for absorption, distribution, metabolism, excretion, local tolerance, toxicity, interaction with other devices, medicinal products or other substances, and potential for adverse reaction. Additionally, a scrutiny procedure as for Class 2B Rule 12 devices will also be required by an expert panel. So now let's move on to some more requirements which are posed by the MDR. So for the manufacturers, not just classifying the device into the respective risk classification, the manufacturer also has an additional pre-market and post-market requirements before he or she can apply for a certification. That is, namely, a so-called summary SSCP report. Yeah, it is an abbreviation for summary of safety and clinical performance. This plays an important part of the very strong post-market follow-up required by the MDR for implantable and Class 3 medical devices. This report is intended to provide the healthcare workers and relevant patients access to current clinical data and other information about the safety and clinical performance of the medical device in question. As mentioned, these are the pre-market and post-market requirements. So along with PESUR, we will come to it later. SSCP is one of the 2 yearly reports which will be required by manufacturers to remain compliant under MDR to market the medical devices in the European Union. The summary of safety and clinical performance is not the same as a regular clinical evaluation report update. The SSCP needs to be updated when the post-market clinical follow-up and the product safety update report, that is PSUR, are updated as a part of the ongoing life cycle of these regulatory requirements. The specific requirements for the SSCP can be found in Articles 32 of the MDR. In addition, European Union has also released the so-called MDCG papers 2019-9, Summary of Safety and Clinical Performance, a guide for manufacturers and notified bodies to provide guidance on presentation of the content in validation of this report. This guidance document outlines the minimum content required, and the manufacturer is thereby encouraged to include additional information to enhance the reader's understanding on the device's safety and performance. The second important report under the pre-market and post-market requirements is the so-called PSUR. PSUR is abbreviated as Product Safety Update Report. This is necessary for manufacturers of Class 2A, 2B, and Class 3 devices and must be prepared for each device and where relevant for each category or group of devices, summarizing the results and conclusions of the analysis of the post-market surveillance data gathered during the entire life cycle. As per the EU MDR Article 86, the periodic safety update report must be prepared for throughout the lifetime of the device. After it has been released to the market, manufacturers of Class 2B and 3 devices shall update the report at least annually, and manufacturers of Class 2A devices shall update the report at least every 2 years. Furthermore, manufacturers of devices of Class 3 or implantable devices shall submit this report by means of an electronic system, the so-called MED, to the notified body. Furthermore, there are a few post-market clinical follow-up requirements as mentioned in the Article 61 of the MDR. Here, the manufacturers are required to provide clinical data obtained via post-market clinical follow-up to increase and intensify, is thereby increased and intensified to a great deal as opposed to what it is under the current medical device directive. So there I come to end of my part, and now I would request my colleague Mr. Nothais to thereby take over to explain you all how it is going to be in the real world to get a CE certification through DQS MED. Thank you. Matthias, can you take over?
I need moderation, then I can take over. Thank you so much. Great presentation, Amruta. Really great.
Thank you.
Great done. I try to share my screen.
We can see your screen, Matthias.
Yeah. But you need to see this one, I guess. So, hello everybody. As you have heard, well, in many cases, in many requirements, MDR looks pretty similar to MDD, but as it is all the time, it's in the details that makes it so different in the handling. So we have implemented the whole medical device regulation procedure from the scratch, have worked out the procedures, and have identified changes related to medical device directive, which directly start during application for certification on medical device. We're still in the same approach if it's about the different parts. As we have heard, we have quality system assessments to do. Those quality system assessments have to be performed on site. We have technical documentation reviews for technical documentation to be done on site or off site. So this is up to the arrangement between the auditor, the assessor, and the company. If it is preferred to be done on site, then this can be done. If it's preferred to be done off site, this is also an option. And as already introduced with a recommendation back from 2013, we have unannounced assessments that have to be performed in a certain extent, depending on the risk classes of the medical devices you place into the market. So these three columns remain practically the same, and for that reason, it's a pretty straightforward procedure for the auditing itself. And well, during application, we have to make sure that the assessment for all those parts can be performed in the right way, with the right competency, with the right prerequisites. Especially with the application itself, there is one new requirement coming in from MDR, which says that we have to evaluate formally the application. We did pretty much the same, of course, also under the medical device directive, but the requirements under MDR have been outlined in more detail and make it very clear that the technical aspects of the medical device have to be evaluated to a far more extent than it was required under the Medical Device Directive, which means that we have to check for the technical file, for the availability of the technical file very upfront. So the technical file has to be filed in with a actual application itself. And the next thing is the result on the evaluation, especially if it has to be rejected for whatever reason, has to be also forwarded to this Udemy database and is then available to the European authorities and potentially also to other notified bodies. In order to handle this appropriately for the clients and for the notified body, we have decided for a pre-submission application. This specific pre-submission application should give you the chance to file in the basic information, and then based on that information we are able to evaluate the technical file in terms of completeness, in terms of the right classification, in terms of the right documentation in place. As such, it's a kind of a completeness check combined with a first review of approach for the technical file, and also based on that information, we then will be able to send out a budgetary draft to you, so that you have an estimation on the potential cost of this assessment based on the information that you provided on the first run. So, as I just said, the initial step, if you decide to go for a certification under the medical device regulation, you initially submit to us specific form sheets on the basic data, and also on the medical devices themselves. So we have two specific form sheets for that. One is basic data form sheet on the company, and the other one is the basic data form sheet on the medical devices, so-called list of medical devices, where we also ask for specific items, for specific characteristics of the medical devices, also a categorization for the different subcategories. As you might know, medical device regulation also follows a specific code to identify groups of medical devices, subcategories of medical devices, and according to those groups, devices are structured, and also the competencies from the notified body, from the auditors, from the assessors, from the experts are structured in the same way. And for an assessment, all those codes, all those different groups must match. Otherwise, we cannot perform the assessment. So the competency is a very intense subject on medical devices, and the grouping of the medical devices is also very intense. During the application, we have to review all those information, and it's very important at that point that basic data always are filled in completely. The more complete the basic data are filed into us, the better is the chance that we can go through the pre-evaluation on the first run. If we cannot go through on the first run, of course, we would have to do several instances, which means it would be a forth and back. And as medical device regulation requirements are somehow intense for us, this will cause permanent delay for all of us. So the more complete we get basic data, the better we can do the evaluation on the first run. As you, of course, might want to know which documents we would request from a potential client, we have prepared some starter kits. I will show them later on. We have prepared those starter kits and make them available on our internet web page. Or if you're interested in the certification, you can also ask us directly, ask the colleagues from the Indian office to help you with the documents. They will happily send it out to you, and also help you in filling them in. Sorry for switching. As soon as the review has been performed for the documents for the first pre-submission application, we will send you a response like everything is in order, if the documents were appropriate, and we can go on with the certification and application procedure. We also have to check if we are designated for the related scope, and of course, if the scope information you provided to us, the group information you provided to us for the related medical device fits to our experience, fits to our estimation, to our experts' estimation, and if that all fits to our competency, to our authorized scope, then we can move on with a certification procedure. In the same moment, you will also receive a cost estimate for the MDR certification procedure, and then we also share the MDR application, the actual MDR application form sheet with you, where you can have provide all the related information, and also as soon as you file in this document, you add the technical file to this application. So that means in the same moment when you file the application to a notified body, that's not specific to DQS MED, that's specific to MDR procedure. As soon as you file an application to a notified body, you have to provide the technical file, the actual technical file for the product that you applied. In the same way, we also provide an upload link to you, where you can store the files for DQS MED, for DQS MED's evaluation procedure. This is according to data protection and security guidelines. It's an internal server, an internal link to our systems, which is not in a cloud or wherever. It's a direct to DQS MED server farm where the documents will be stored then. So everything is, from that perspective, is safe, and we can prevent from sending such information by email, which is quite insecure and potentially poses the intellectual potential to risk, as it is practically open to everyone. So that's typically what you get as soon as the evaluation for the pre-submission application has been done positively. The next step is the formal application. That means you file the technical documentation to us, you file the application form sheet to us, and any additionally required documents that are outlined in the procedure related to the device, depending whether it's a class 3 device or whatsoever. There might be additional information requested, and for this step, we need all those documents at once. As from the moment when you file the application, we would be ready, or we can start the technical file assessment whenever we are ready with the right auditor resource for that. As soon as you have filed the application, we will then go into the formal application review as such, check for the completeness of the provided documents, check for the first technical information in the technical file, if they match to the pre-submission, to the pre-application information, if that just goes along, and then you receive a formal offer for the assessment. At that moment, you receive the formal offer that you can still accept or, well, hopefully not reject. Also, at that point, we select for the competent auditors for your case and schedule for the dates for the assessment and for the system audits, for the system assessment for the on-site audits. At the same moment, DQS MED or DQS would request a prepayment for a certain extent of the assessment, just to make sure that everything is set up appropriately and to move on with the process. In that prepayment invoice, the certification procedure for the first year usually is included. That means that covers the system assessment, and that also covers the technical file assessment for the applied file. If you apply for several files, of course, the system assessment will only be charged for the time it happens, and not with every single assessment or with every single technical file assessment. And as soon as we have received the prepayment, we can start over with assessing your technical files. As you see as well, there is another starter kit which outlines the documents that are requested for the formal application, and those documents are also available on our website as named as Starter Kit 3. So the starter kits, the different starter kits for Starter Kit 1 contain as an information package a description of the application process under medical device regulation, application deadlines, capacity survey, which is more or less relevant for existing clients, requirements for the technical documentation, and an overview over the guidance documents and recommendations. In the Starter Kit 2, which then is requested for the pre-application, is the overview over guidance documents and recommendations. Again, is the process steps under Regulation 2017-745, or in other words, the medical device regulation. Submission of technical file documentation, technical documentation under the MDR, which is the request or the description of what we would need in terms of technical documentation. It contains the basic data form sheet on the organization, on the company, and the basic data on the medical devices, the list of medical devices where you have to enter all the medical devices that would be subject to a certification with DQS MED. Additionally to that, we have an Annex 1 checklist for the requirements and a checklist related to the general safety and protection requirements of the medical device. And all those items would be requested with a pre-application. In the next step, in Starter Kit 3, there's a guidance on technical documentation which says which describes the elements that would be requested to be uploaded, to be provided in line with the technical with a formal application. That means all the documents we need are listed in here. It's an outline of what the expectation is for the technical file, for the completeness of the technical file. If anything is missing with that, we potentially cannot start, or at least if we have started, we cannot finalize on the evaluation later on. That means that also would cause much delays in the assessment procedure. It's very important for the technical for the assessment under MDR that the sequence absolutely is to firstly assess the technical file, and then move on to the stage 1 and then to the stage 2 on-site audit related to MDR. As the technical file assessment provides information that have to be verified during the on-site assessment and have to be verified towards the system that you have implemented for the products. As this is a very new regulation, we cannot transition from other standards. We cannot transition from MDD to MDR without doing anything. Well, not even with doing anything. We have to go for new applications, as MDR is a very new and an all new set of requirements, which expects to start over completely from the scratch. In addition to technical file, in preparation of the system assessment, of the on-site assessment, we also request documents like the quality manual, quality policy, procedures on the post-market surveillance, vigilance procedures, sample post-market clinical follow-up plans, and so on at the time of the application as well. So that's it from my part.